It was nearly midnight, and the downtown streets had grown quiet under the orange glow of the streetlights. Ethan Cross, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit and carrying the weight of a day packed with boardroom battles and corporate calls, found himself unexpectedly hungry. The only place open was a small, old-fashioned café tucked between a pharmacy and a laundromat. Its neon sign flickered, and the inside looked nearly empty. Still, he stepped in. The bell above the door jingled softly. The air smelled of brewed coffee and grilled cheese. He glanced around. A young woman was moving quickly between the tables, refilling sugar jars, wiping surfaces, stacking menus. She wore a faded uniform, and her shoes looked worn, but she moved with purpose. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and though dark circles framed her eyes, she smiled the moment she saw him. "Late night?" she asked kindly, offering a menu. He nodded. "You're still working?" She let out a tired laugh. "Yeah, just started my second shift." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Double shift, every day this week," she said, pouring him a cup of coffee without being asked. "Gotta do what you gotta do." He stirred his coffee, watching her as she moved back to the counter. Something about her intrigued him. She wasn't dragging her feet or complaining. She wasn't glued to her phone. She was present, real. A few minutes later, as she returned to check on him, he asked, more out of curiosity than conversation, "Why push yourself so hard?" She paused. Her smile faded just a little, replaced by something deeper, pride, maybe. Pain, too. "So my little sister never has to," she said simply, her voice quiet but steady. And just like that, Ethan Cross, the man who thought he'd seen and heard it all, sat back in silence, stirred not by profit margins or investor reports, but by the quiet strength of a woman who refused to quit. Back in his high-rise penthouse overlooking the glittering skyline, Ethan Cross poured himself a drink and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, but his mind wasn't on the view. The city buzzed below like it always did, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about stock prices, mergers, or quarterly earnings. He was thinking about her. That waitress, Emma, the way she had looked at him when she said, "So my little sister never has to." It wasn't just a statement. It was a vow, a fire in her voice that echoed something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, real purpose. He sank into the leather chair in his study, loosened his tie, and stared at nothing for a moment. He couldn't understand why her words kept playing in his mind like a broken loop. He met thousands of people, executives, innovators, leaders, but none of them had ever struck him the way she did in that brief moment. There was something different about her. Something raw and rare. The next morning, instead of heading straight into his usual executive meetings, he paused. Then he called his assistant. "Lena, can you find me some information on a woman named Emma Rodriguez?" He asked. "She works nights at Joe's Cafe on 14th. I don't need anything invasive, just her story." His assistant was used to strange requests, but this one had a different tone. She didn't question it. By noon, he had the file on his desk. Emma Rodriguez. 27 years old. No criminal record. No social media presence. Full custody of her 13-year-old sister, Lily, after their mother passed away from cancer 5 years ago. 2 jobs. Day shifts at a bookstore, night shifts at the cafe. Rent paid late 3 times in the last year. No vacations. No luxury. Just work. And family. He stared at her file longer than he should have. This wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was admiration, respect. The kind of respect even money couldn't buy. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was surviving, quietly, with grace and grit. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes still on her photo. For the first time in years, someone had made him curious, not about what they could do for him, but about who they were without expecting anything at all. A week later, the door to the cafe jingled again, and Emma looked up from behind the counter, expecting another late-night regular or a delivery driver. But when she saw him, Ethan Cross, the same man from last week, minus the intimidating suit, her brows lifted slightly in surprise. He wore jeans, a dark jacket, and a quiet expression, as if he wasn't entirely sure why he had come back. He nodded politely and took the same booth near the window. Emma grabbed a coffee pot and walked over with a half smile. "You again," she said playfully. "You know, most people only leave $1,000 tip once." Ethan smiled. "Then I guess I'm not most people." She poured his coffee, and they exchanged a look, calm, curious, no pretense. She didn't fawn over him like others usually did when they recognized his face. Maybe she didn't care who he was. Maybe she did and just didn't show it. Either way, it grounded him. For a few minutes, they talked casually, about the weather, the quietness of the night, the cafe's best pie. But soon, the small talk faded. He leaned forward slightly, fingers wrapped around his coffee cup, and said, "I've been thinking about what you said. About your sister." Emma stiffened a little but stayed composed. "What about it?" "It stayed with me," he said honestly. "Most people your age don't think like that. They chase what they want. You're building something for someone else." Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. Compliments from strangers didn't land often, especially not like this. "I want to help you," Ethan continued. "Not out of guilt or pity. I want to support what you're doing. A better job, tuition for your sister, whatever you need, I can make that happen." Emma stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that for me?" He hesitated for a second, then said, "Because I believe in investing in people who never quit. You're doing more with less than most people do with everything." She shook her head slowly, unsure whether to laugh or walk away. "I'm not looking for handouts." "It's not a handout," Ethan replied gently. "It's respect. You're the kind of person the world overlooks." "I didn't." She looked down at her notepad, lips pressed in thought. Then she said softly, "You don't even know me." "Not yet," he said. "But I'd like to." Emma didn't smile. She didn't thank him or blush. But she didn't walk away either. And that was enough to keep him coming back. 6 months had passed, but to Emma, it sometimes felt like an entire lifetime had shifted. The cafe was quieter now, not because business had slowed, but because she only worked the early morning shifts, by choice. No more double shifts. No more dragging her body home past midnight with aching feet and a full heart of worry. Her sister, Lily, was thriving, enrolled in one of the best private schools in the city on a scholarship Ethan had quietly arranged through one of his foundations. Emma had resisted at first, unsure how to accept help without feeling like she owed someone something. But Ethan never made her feel small. He never acted like a savior. He simply showed up, again and again. Emma had joined a business mentorship program he'd recommended, though he never pressured her. She studied during the day, attended workshops in the evenings, and slowly, the gears of her life started to shift towards something she had once thought was out of reach. Tonight, Ethan sat in his usual booth near the window. He was dressed down again, his jacket tossed over the seat, sleeves rolled up. No bodyguards, no fancy cars parked out front. Just him, a notebook open in front of him, and 2 coffees, one for her. Emma walked over and slid into the booth across from him without a word. It had become their quiet ritual. She didn't need to ask why he kept coming back, and he didn't need to ask if she was okay. "You're late," he said with a faint smile. "Had to help Lily with a science project," she replied. "She's building a model of the solar system. It's held together with more glue than gravity." Ethan chuckled. "Sounds like a solid foundation." Emma smirked. "Like our economy." He laughed, and for a few seconds, there was nothing between them but warmth. No wealth, no status, no expectations, just 2 people who had chosen to show up for each other. She sipped her coffee, her eyes drifting out the window. "You know, I used to think this city didn't notice people like me. That we were just background noise. People working quietly while the world passed us by." Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. "I noticed." She turned to him, meeting his eyes. "Yeah," she said, "you did." And somehow, in the flickering light of the cafe, with the hum of the city outside, something unspoken settled between them. Not a transaction, not a favor returned, just something real. It didn't start with flowers or fairy tale promises. It started with a simple question, and an answer that changed everything.